Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining in today. My name is Anna. I'm your host, and welcome to the Binge on Self-Love podcast. This month, the month of May, is the Mental Health Awareness Month. Eating disorders are one of the most common mental illnesses, affecting around 70 million people worldwide, which is a crazy big number. Moreover, eating disorders have the second highest mortality rate among mental illnesses, right behind opioid addiction. Eating disorders affect people of any age, of any gender, or socioeconomical circumstances. So therefore, eating disorders are not something we should take lightly or something that we could ignore. And as some of you know who have listened to this podcast before, my goal with the Binge on Self-Love podcast is to raise awareness about eating disorders and related issues like negative body image, low self-worth, etc. But also to show that it's okay to talk about what we are struggling with and that there's absolutely nothing we should feel ashamed of and that it's totally okay to ask for help so you don't have to suffer in silence and suffer alone. Because I know that so many of you are seeking support on your journey, I've decided to share an update on my eating disorder recovery journey because I want to be transparent and I don't want to pretend that it's been all rainbows and butterflies for me because, it was for some time, but things have changed and I've relapsed and I've fallen into the binge eating cycle again. Welcome to the Binge on Self-Love podcast. My name is Anna, and after struggling with binge eating disorder for many years and hating every inch of my body, I've realized that I don't want to spend the rest of my life feeling unhappy, hating every part of my body, and wishing to lose weight. Because life is so much more than dieting, comparing yourself with people on social media, or counting calories. So I've created this podcast to provide a safe space for anyone trying to heal their relationship with food, their bodies, and themselves. Join me every Tuesday on a self-love/self-acceptance discovery journey where I share my experience and talk to experts from all over the world. Disclaimer: this podcast talks about eating disorders and body image. Binge on Self-Love podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It doesn't provide professional medical advice and it is not a substitute for diagnosis or treatment. When I shared an update on my journey the last time, it was in March 2022. I had looked it up because I have recorded an episode, which I will link in the show notes just in case somebody would like to listen to it. But anyway, that was over 2 years ago. And in that episode, I've shared that I occasionally started binge eating again after years of being binge free for many years. And back then in 2022, I really thought that it was just some kind of phase that was a consequence of a lot of things that were going on in my life back then. I was moving to a different city, I was changing jobs, I was kind of leaving my old life behind. I had to meet with new people, make new friendships, and I had no routines, and I had to rebuild all my routines. There was a lot of change going on. And also it was in the midst of pandemic, so there was this additional layer of the unknown, of fear, of not really being sure about what's going to happen in the future and so on. So at that time, I thought that it's probably a consequence of everything that's been happening at that moment. And as it always is, the binge eating episodes started really sneakily, as they always do. And it started with me having these intrusive thoughts like, maybe I can go to the grocery store after work today and buy something that will comfort me or something that I really like. And what started as these intrusive thoughts ended up with me binge eating occasionally and then feeling miserable and then somehow over time falling into the binge eating cycle. And even though I was certain, or not certain, that's probably not the right word, because you can never be 100% certain, but I was almost certain that I'll never start binge eating again. So much so that for a long time, when I was having these binge eating episodes, I haven't acknowledged them. And I didn't want to admit it to myself that this is happening right now. I wasn't binge eating to the extent that I used to in the past, like before I started my recovery journey. So I think that also contributed to my denial and to my perception like, hey, this is probably just some kind of glitch on the road and it's probably happening because XYZ and I am not having problems with binge eating again. It will pass or something like this. I was really in a denial for a long time. And I really believed, I would say, that it all would just go away once everything around me settles down. But I mean, I think that everything settled down like 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, but for some reason, I was still binge eating. I was not binge eating like all day, every day. I would have these periods of time when I would be binge eating throughout a span of like a few weeks, and then for a few weeks, the binge eating would go away and I would be okay. And then the binge eating would occasionally sneak back in. It would maybe be more intense than before, or it would last longer than it did before. And then again, I somehow would manage to become binge free for some time. And it was like this cycle that kept repeating. And I've tried to look at things like, am I eating enough? Or am I eating regularly? Am I like leaving too much space for me to get really hungry? Or am I denying myself some food that makes me want to binge on a lot of junk food or whatever? I've also mentioned in the wedding episode that before my wedding last year, I started to restrict myself a little bit. And that, of course, eventually led to me binge eating even more. And I would say that ever since, it never got better for like a stable period of time. Ever since, I would say like August or September last year, I would be binge eating like every couple of days or so. And it hasn't really gotten any better since then. So I have to say the past 3 years or so have been a little rocky in terms of binge eating. And it's been especially in the past few weeks when I've realized that I actually really have a problem with binge eating again. And that it's time to start looking into what's happening more deeply. And it's time to start paying attention to why it's all happening. In the past few weeks, I would say there were more days in a week where I would binge rather than days when I would not binge. And the more often I was binging, the worse I obviously felt, both physically and mentally. I was really physically sick from a lot of those binges because they were like getting worse and worse with each binge session. And I have to say I'm not used to it anymore. So I got like quite sick from all those binges. I had troubles falling asleep. I kept waking up multiple times a night. I got really puffy and uncomfortable and my skin got worse and my digestive system got really bad. And all of that brought the old feelings or the feelings from the past. And I started to feel really, really bad mentally about what's going on. And I'm not saying that to pity myself, not at all. I'm saying that because that's something I've became aware recently, and I believe it's really important to be honest with yourself, to say things how you think they are, how you feel them, in order to be able to do something about it. And one important thing is that I also started to feel like I'm losing control over myself, over my life, over everything. And that scared the shit out of me, may I say. It really makes me feel anxious And I would say all those feelings drew me back to binge eating, if that makes sense. Because for some reason, binge eating for me is like a way how I let go of the emotions, of the fears, of expectations, of stress, of feeling like I'm lacking behind everyone and everything and all that for like teeny tiny bit of time. But once the binge is over, like all of those feelings come back. Even worse, I'm feeling even worse. So binge eating is definitely not something I want in my life. But for some reason, it came back and I want to deal with it. And like I've said, for some time, I thought that I probably know why it came back. I thought it was because of the stress and because of a lot of those changes that I've mentioned earlier. But looking at things from a retrospect, I've realized that I would always find a reason, like a different reason, during those times when I was binge eating. First, it would be moving, then it would be a new job, then it would be getting adjusted in a new job, then it would be meeting new people, then it would be falling out of my routine and having to build a new set of routines, then it would be, I don't know, the stress of getting married, then it would be the stress of preparing my wedding, then it would be me feeling like I'm lacking behind in life, then it would be me not feeling content in my previous job and thinking about changing jobs and all that. Looking at things from retrospect, I would always find like an excuse for me to binge and to be like, okay, so let's just do it one more time. From tomorrow, I won't be binging anymore. Which, as you obviously probably know, it doesn't work like that. But yeah, I guess I kept saying that to myself, thinking that I will be binge free from tomorrow forever on. I'm gonna be honest, it sucks, and I'm not particularly happy about it because I really believed that this part of my life is solved, it's closed, it's sealed, and I don't have to worry about it, but it's not the case. I've made the first step of admitting it to myself, admitting to myself that I'm struggling with binge eating again, and that the problem got bigger over time, and I am at a point where I don't feel like I can tackle the problem alone. And that's perfectly fine. I'm not ashamed by any means that I've reached out to help. And I'm happy to say that I started seeing a therapist again. And if you are going through anything in life, please never, never feel ashamed of going to a therapy, of seeing a therapist, or anything like that. To me, it's a sign of bravery. It's a sign that you actually want to do something about the problems that you're struggling with, the issues that you're having, the emotions that you don't know how to deal with, or whatever it is that you are experiencing or going through. Asking for help is a sign of strength. And even if you don't feel like strong at that moment, it is a sign of strength, and it is a sign that you want to do something about that situation that you are at and that you want your life to get better. I think the worst I could do would be to pretend like nothing's happening, like I am not really binge eating, or I'm just binge eating occasionally and I'm just gonna relax and pretend like this is the last time I'll be binging, and from tomorrow on I won't be binge eating anymore, like I've just said. And also what I don't like about binge eating is how much it affects other areas of my life. And I also realized at the moment when it started affecting other areas of my life that this is a bigger problem than I initially thought, because I don't want to go back to a point where binge eating was affecting my entire life. I'm so happy that I was able to gain my life back, and I don't want to give it up again. I don't know about you, but for me, binge eating and binge eating disorder have always been like this giant secret that I've kept from everyone for a really, really long time. And over time, I've shared with different people and obviously in this podcast, but I don't want to feel like that. For a long time, I thought that I can probably deal with this on my own because I have dealt with it in the past, not on my own, but I have dealt with it in the past, and I should have all the tools necessary to recover again, right? Which is true, partially, but at the same time, there's a lot that's changed throughout the years. I have changed, the circumstances have changed, maybe even the reasons why I reached back to food and to binge eating has changed. And I've tried some of the tools and they don't seem to be working like they used to, or they don't work for a long time. And I feel like I really need to expand those tools and explore what else can I do differently in my life to recover from binge eating disorder. So that's another reason why I've reached out to a therapist, because also I think that I get really caught up in my opinions, in my thoughts, in my observations, and I think it's really good to also have someone look at you from a different perspective and have a discussion with you about what's going on with your life and provide you with a different opinion on things, or just be a support system for you at that time when you need it. I believe the key to even becoming open to the idea of getting help and to the idea of starting your recovery is being 100% honest with yourself. Because you just can't lie to yourself and pretend that everything's okay when clearly it's not. And you can't pretend for the sake of your image or for the sake of someone else that you're not struggling when actually you are. So that's also why I think talking about mental health, talking about whatever it is that we are going through and sharing our stories is so important, because a lot of times we may feel like we are the only person in this world who's going through some shit, when in reality, it's like 99.9% of people are going through something. We just don't want other people to know, or we just don't want to show anyone. And it's okay, you don't have to share with the whole world. So you don't have to go and record a podcast about it. You can reach out to a therapist, or you can reach out to someone who you love and who you trust and share with them whatever it is you're going through. Plus, one really important thing is that I believe you shouldn't wait for a moment when you will feel ready, or for a moment when you feel like it's the right time to start, because chances are you will never feel 100% ready, and you will never feel like now it's the right time to start dealing with whatever it is you're going through, because it's scary. Nobody wants to sit down, start talking about their problems, start opening up about all the things we've been trying to avoid for so long, and nobody wants to really dig deep and open all of these wounds and talk about it. But I think the sooner we start dealing with those problems, the better. Nobody wants to do that because it hurts like hell, but we have to do it for the sake of saving ourselves. You deserve to live a life in which you are happy and content and loved and loving, and in a life where you can feel proud of yourself and where you can enjoy every moment of it. And also, I think that sometimes we feel like we cannot share or open up about whatever it is that we are going through, because people around us or people we know seem to be struggling with something so much worse than we are. And we may feel like, well, who am I to complain about my problems when this person seems to be going through something 10 times worse than I am? Which may be true, but you have to realize that mental health is not a competition. We are all going through something. And it's not about who's doing worse, who's doing better. It's about your mental health and how you can take care of your mental health and how you can learn to love and accept yourself and deal with the problems that you are going through. Of course, I totally think that we should be supportive of each other, and we should encourage each other, and we should be supportive of each other's mental health, but I think it's also like with the oxygen mask that you really need to start taking care of yourself first before you can reach out to others and start helping those, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does. So that was my honest update on my current binge eating recovery journey. I don't feel like I can share more because there's not really much more to share. I have only started seeing the therapist recently, so there's still a long way to go, a long journey for me to go. So please keep reminding yourself as much as you can that your mental health is equally as important as your physical health, and that we shouldn't take it for granted. We need to proactively take care of our mental health so we can live a life where we feel happy and content, like I've said before. And that's it from me today. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. If you did, please make sure to subscribe to the Binge on Self-Love podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube so you don't miss any future episodes. I'll be back next week. Until then, take care and talk to you soon. Bye!
Have to be your biggest fan. And when things are really tough and they're really rough and nothing's working, but there's something inside of you that says, no, just have to follow that. Because you don't know who you're